All right, well, welcome everybody. Thanks for being here. This session is being recorded, and we're going to talk about roadblocks to Smartsheet success and how to fix them. And I'm Mike Fritch, if you don't know me, operations leader and a business advisor and a Smartsheet expert. I've been using Smartsheet since 2013. I've been building solutions since 2015, and I've spent about 15 years in various corporate roles, 13 years in consulting, and 10 years in the military with active and reserve duty. A lot of media appearances, you can see some of them there. And really, I'm focusing in on Smartsheet tips, training, and experts, and lining you up with expertise that you need in the Smartsheet arena. And the experts that I want to highlight today is Confo, and Confo does Smartsheet solutions for semiconductor and solar companies. A lot of work around capital equipment makers and their fabs. You can see some of the services there, and just go to our website at confo.com to learn more about us there. So with that, we'll jump right into the content, and I'll move pretty quickly and still keep a little bit of time at the end for questions. But if you've got a burning question, go ahead and jump in with it. So what we'll cover today is really talk about what I've seen as the top roadblocks when implementing Smartsheet and the best ways to break through those roadblocks. And we'll talk about each of these briefly in succession, but you can see the list on the left, and you probably recognize that these things are roadblocks that you have probably encountered in any project or any introduction of a new solution or new technology. So in some ways, they're not unique. And the ways that you deal with them, again, some of them are unique to Smartsheet, some of them are just general good practices. But we'll go ahead and walk through each of them and then have a little bit of conversation around it at the end. So as we focus in on the roadblocks, again, these are things that I have seen impact a Smartsheet implementation, but they're not necessarily unique to Smartsheet. So the first is just general resistance to change, okay? And so, you know, anytime we go into an organization and want to try something new, there's usually a strong portion of the folks that are maybe just like, hey, we don't want to, you know, what we're doing is good enough. You know, don't bother me. Don't try to upset the apple cart. So you certainly will run into that as you do a Smartsheet implementation. The other thing that we'll hear quite often is, gosh, you know what, we just can't learn another system, a new system. It's like we're already burdened with 5 or 15 or 20 different applications that our folks have to use. We can't add one more on top of that. And then the classic is, of course, oh, we're too busy. We just got too much going on. We can't even, you know, stop to get gas is a saying that we've heard. So too busy often jumps up as something that is a barrier to doing your implementation. And then often with folks that are not familiar with Smartsheet, or maybe from your IT department, that, you know, there's always some security concerns. Well, this cloud-based solution, how do I know it's secure? You know, if I'm working in it, is my data okay? Those typical questions come up when we're implementing Smartsheet, just as they probably would come up with any other technology solution. And then one of the things that's a little unique to Smartsheet is really Smartsheet promotes transparency and visibility. And so, you know, that when you're working in Smartsheet, it's meant for collaboration. That means that folks can see what's going on. It's, you know, it's kind of an open kimono type environment if you're going to leverage it from a collaboration perspective. And so often there's a little bit of fear with people saying, well, I don't know if I really want everybody to see, you know, kind of what I'm doing and have that audit trail. And really, I'm not sure if I want to collaborate as openly as this tool enables me to do. So that's something that you'll probably have to deal with. And hand in hand with that is something that we see very frequently about folks that are, working extensively in Excel and maybe are the holders of the Uber Excel sheet that has all the magic in it, and that they're the only one in the company that knows how to do the Excel sheet. I've probably run into that in almost every consulting gig that I've done across companies big and small. Excel is a great tool, and companies rely on it heavily, but often you've got some things where folks are plugging business processes with really fancy and elaborate Excel tools, and it often comes down to one person that knows how to do it. And so, they tend to kind of feel like, hey, this is my secret sauce. This is my IP, even though I'm working for the company. I'm the one that figured out how to do this. And also, it makes me really, really important, and it gives me some job security. And so, as you go in, when you're bringing Smartsheet in and bringing in that visibility and that transparency and building a solution, one of the things that we always like to do is embed that intellectual property into the Smartsheet solution itself. And so that is threatening for the folks that are kind of the gurus that are the single sources of this information. So that is one that we always really do struggle with and have to make a concerted effort to fix. And then the other one that I always laugh at is, I call it the world peace objection. And that's when somebody goes, well, can it do this, this, and this? And can we automatically integrate with all 27 of our other enterprise systems? And I want it to do these other 5 things. And so, often people are in that, well, gosh, if I can't fix world peace, then I don't want to do anything. And that's true on often on objections with Smartsheet, but it's also true with objections to kind of other solutions. And you really have to understand, one, are they legitimately really, really wanting to solve all the problems, or are they just putting up a barrier so that they can go, oh man, if I can block this effort just by saying, oh, it's not going to fix everything that I need to fix. And then hand in hand with that is kind of the other side of the coin, is really feature limitations. And that might be when someone says, well, gee, can it do this? I want it to automatically change color based on the temp. I'm being absurd now. Based on the temperature in the room. That's really important to me. So often there may be a legitimate limitation there that they're concerned with, but it could also be a red herring. In other words, they're throwing out things that are, not really important, hoping to block your effort. And again, I've seen this with Smartsheet implementations, and I've seen it with other implementations as well. And then finally, one that comes up frequently that's a little bit legitimate is folks that are very good Excel users. If you're not familiar with Smartsheet yet, you'll know that they have a sheet structure. So there's an individual sheet for every sheet, and a sheet can't have tabs. It's a really basic thing, but it's something that folks struggle with. So a lot of times when we're introducing a Smartsheet solution, people are like, I want tabs, I want tabs. And so we have to kind of walk them through that. And then the second thing is that Smartsheet is a cloud-based solution. And so you need to be connected to work in it. And so we have seen objections where folks go, oh, I got to work offline. If I can't work offline, then this is absolutely no good for me and I can't do anything. So that's quickly, those are kind of the main barriers and objections that we've seen. And as you can see, they're not necessarily unique to Smartsheet, but they're things that as you are making a Smartsheet implementation, that you're going to really have to deal with. So I'm going to pause here. Any questions or comments before I jump over to how do you deal with objections? Okay, great. Well, let's move through. So, given that you are going to have these barriers, how do you break through them? And there's really a pretty good and comprehensive list of things that you ought to consider. And here we go. So first is, just like any implementation or any introduction or any project, you really want to set a good foundation. So as we think about what are some of the foundational things that you want to have in place, whether you're implementing Smartsheet or implementing any other new initiative or transformation. And the first thing is, you've got to practice good change management. And I won't go into detail, but managing your stakeholders, that classic Project Management Institute, project management book of knowledge discipline of, identifying your stakeholders, having your communication plan, all those things, and having them to an appropriate degree and level to the effort that you're trying to do to make change. So, very important is having a good sponsor, having somebody who in authority who supports the effort, or at least isn't blocking the effort. So good change management, like any initiative, is really important when you're implementing Smartsheet. The other thing is very true, is that it's important to have a culture of trust. If you don't have a culture of trust, then for this effort, try to build some trust. And this one, although this is true for almost any effort and any initiative, it's especially true for Smartsheet because of that transparency and that collaborative environment that enables Smartsheet to do great things. So really, you've got to approach it from a trust perspective. It's like, hey, we're not going to use this we have the ability to kind of see what's going on, but we're not going to use that visibility to punish you, or we're not going to use this against you. We're not using this as a way to ease you out of your job because you have the secret sauce. So you've got to really establish that trust. And then as we're going through and you look at specifics, as I talked about those red herrings, really, when you listen to folks and they go, oh, I'm not sure, or this is why I'm reluctant, try to get at the heart of, is it a real concern or a real perceived concern, or is it just an excuse? And you should be able to get a feel for that, so that, if, hey, somebody's just throwing up roadblocks, they're not really legit. So let me see what the root cause is behind these roadblocks, as opposed to trying to solve something that's a red herring and spending a lot of effort on that. If it is a real concern, then you want to understand that more deeply and see if you can answer that concern in your implementation. And so what are some of the specific, those were general kind of foundational things that really can apply to almost any implementation. But as we talk about Smartsheet in particular, here are some areas that can help you focus and have more success with your Smartsheet implementation. So the first thing is, folks may say, well, why Smartsheet? Why are we using this tool? And this is work that we've done previously. It's one of the most highly rated collaborative work management systems. You can do, if necessary, make a comparison between other CWMs. This is an example from an implementation I did in another space, and they were considering Smartsheet versus Asana versus Wrike. There may be places and situations where Wrike or Asana would come up on top. So I'm not making the case that Smartsheet beats every single time in every situation, but it often does, and that's why it's one of my favorites. So, letting people know, well, gosh, why are we going down this path helps. The other thing that folks often ask, and less so today because Smartsheet is out there and is pretty well known now, but you say, well, who the heck is Smartsheet? And they've been around for 15 years. They're in 90% of the Fortune 100 companies, and you can see the other things here. So having a little bit of this data so that folks can stand back and go, okay, I hadn't heard of them before, but all right, I understand that this isn't something brand new, and this is a legit company, that sort of thing. And then often getting into a little bit more detail around permissions and security can be helpful. And so From a security perspective, again, we talked about that it could be your IT department. It might be some senior managers that say, well, gosh, is this really secure? It's in the cloud. And with that, there's a couple of resources. If you go to the Smartsheet website, they have white papers about security, but also if you look at their certifications, they're FedRAMP, GDPR, FERPA, and HIPAA certified. So I think that speaks well to the security level that it has. It is corporate level enterprise security. There's single sign-on, those types of things. So you can answer that degree of concern, relatively easy by saying, hey, here's how it's certified. It's in 90% of the Fortune 100. And then if somebody's a deep dive security geek, you can go in and get those very detailed, specific white papers to go in depth with them. On the other side of security is the permissions and the change control. And this is more from the perspective of the user. So this also helps as we think about that barrier where folks were concerned about the transparency and visibility of the solution, where they're like, I don't know if I want to have everybody looking at my work. With every Smartsheet asset, you set the permissions for sharing. And the permissions are very, very detailed, and they're very helpful. So there's the administrator who has complete ownership over an asset, can change the elements of the asset. There's the editor, and the editor can go inside a sheet and make changes to the sheet, but they can't change the sheet structure. So again, somebody that maybe has their secret sauce and they're like, I would never share my Excel sheet with somebody because they would screw it up. They can do that freely in Smartsheet because they can only work inside the sheet. They can't mess with the columns or the structures. And when you give someone editor permission, you can allow them to share with others, or you can deny them the ability to share with others. So that's very controlled. And so that adds some security and also adds some safety to people that own their assets. You can give somebody a commenter permission where they can come in and look at stuff. They can't change it, but they can add some comments. So that's a relatively new feature and very cool. And then there's viewer, where somebody, just as it says, they can go in and view. So with these, you can reinforce your users that, hey, whatever you build, you can share as little or as much of it as you please. And then a couple other features that are really awesome from that is the ability to highlight changes. And so you can look at what's been changed in your sheet, during the last hour, from the last time that you logged in, things like that. And where that fits in from the standpoint of kind of permissions is when I've shared something, maybe I'm a little nervous that somebody's going to make a change. And I'm like, oh, if they make a change, I may not be able to fix it. I won't know what's going on. Well, you can easily see what changed. And by looking at the cell history, you can see who changed it, the date time stamp of when they changed it, and what that change was, and the whole history of that from the beginning of the cell. And so that really can help, especially with folks that are a little afraid, where they're, got ownership for a sheet today, where they'll feel like somebody will mess this up. Hey, we can see what's going on and we can go ahead and fix it. And again, the flip side of that is from a trust perspective, you want to establish the trust that you're not using this to, let me see if I can catch somebody doing a bad thing by looking at the cell history and see if they mess something up. No, it's a tool to just make everybody work together more easily and better. And then, a lot of, and Stephanie, you might appreciate this as a Excel maven, but one of the things when people say, oh, I'm too busy, or gosh, I don't want to learn a new system, my answer to them is always, you almost don't have to learn anything new. I use, saying that all these different meats taste like chicken. Well, when I talk about Smartsheet, I say, you know what? It tastes like Excel and it tastes like Project. So when you open up a sheet in Smartsheet, you can view it in grid mode and it looks and functions almost exactly like an Excel sheet, but it's got a lot more power and a lot more functionality. And so for the person that just wants to kind of get started, they can go in and work in that grid mode, do everything that they would do in Excel. And then as they get more familiar with it, they can start doing some of the cooler things and learn as they go. And the same thing is true with Microsoft Project. Same thing in Smartsheet is you can have a sheet and look at it in Gantt view, and then that sheet behaves like Microsoft Project, and it has all that project functionality of dependencies, et cetera, et cetera. So that's one of the ways to really deal with the barrier of I don't want to learn anything new, or I'm too busy to do that. This helps people say, okay, well, gosh, it looks really familiar to me. Maybe it's not that steep of a hill to climb in order to do that. And then, of course, everybody's busy. We're way too busy. And so that is, a legitimate objection. But the answer to that is really, you know what, we're gonna save you time and work with Smartsheet, because we can automate some things, we can increase the collaboration, and we've got some proven results of where that has worked in the past. And so you can grab some of the studies off of the Smartsheet site. I'm showing you a graphic from the Forrester study, and I've got a link to the study itself, where they found that creators which are people that created sheets, those owners were 21% more productive with Smartsheet than working in Excel and other places. And that the collaborators, who are free, by the way, they don't need a license, were 25% more productive. And so you can look at the details of that report and see what it says. But my own experience, which has been repeated many, many times, is in one example, after 6 weeks of introducing the solution, we were able to reduce workflow steps by 30%. We eliminated 400 plus coordination emails per week and saved each project manager 12 hours per week with some automated reporting and the elimination of duplicate data. Now, that needed us to go in and look at that business process and optimize it a little bit and fit a smart solution that would work for that use case. But that the ROI was really quick and the results were really quick. So you can make the case, and folks will either believe you or not, but you want to choose something that's going to prove that out pretty quickly. And the other one that we've heard on occasion, and this one's legitimate in the standpoint that Smartsheet is cloud-based, and you can't work in a disconnected mode or work offline. Now, there's rumors that maybe they're working on something with that, but I don't know if that's true or not. But if somebody has that issue, then you want to really understand, okay, well, how are we going to deal with that? And I always question, well, how often are you really offline? I mean, how frequently does that happen? And when you're offline, for how long are you offline? And when you say you're offline, do you not even have a phone? And what's your job? Is it true that you can't wait? So if you're not online 24/7, you can't do your job. And there may be some answers that are yes. It's like no, and then Smartsheet may not be the right answer. But for most people, the periods of time that they're offline is not going to interfere with using the Smartsheet solution. You can use your phone. The Smartsheet mobile app is really, really effective. I always say, well, gosh, you could pay for Wi-Fi. The scenario that folks come up with often is like, well, when I'm flying, I can't be working online. You say, well, I mean, you could pay for Wi-Fi. And if all that fails, then you can export and import sheets. So if you've got a sheet, you go, I'm going to have to work on this thing while I'm on a plane. I can't get Wi-Fi. You can export it into Excel or export it into Project, work remotely, and then when you come back, you can import it back in again. And there's also a technique where you can take a large sheet and you can copy and paste into Smartsheet with that highlight changes function, and you will immediately see if any value was changed. It'll display that yellow. And so that helps ensure that you know that you didn't screw things up. So there's some ways to deal with that. And if you'd like to know more, I'd be happy to show you a more detailed demonstration of how you make that happen. So with that, with everything in mind, kind of an overarching thing we also keep in mind is you want to apply the Goldilocks principle as you're bringing Smartsheet in. And so when you're going after something, you don't want to go after something that's too big because that's going to overwhelm people. You don't want to do something that's too small, then people are going to go, well, what's the point? Big deal. They won't be impressed enough. But if you can find an application or a solution or a first thing where it's going to help out that's just right, then that enables you to get some quick wins, get a quick ROI, and then get some buy-in from your team and move on to bigger things. So that's true for implementing Smartsheet. That's true for implementing other solutions. And it's just a general principle that I've always embraced as I've made changes in organizations. And so that is everything in a nutshell. If you would like to make some improvements, get started on that, you can schedule a call with me. You can give me an email, give me a text, and I would be happy to deep dive with you a little bit further. So with that, I'm going to stop the share, and I'm going to stop